Blessings, beloveds. Welcome back. Let's talk about the upcoming full moon in the sign of Cancer. And so, where to begin with that would be to consider where the new moon began, which was at 12 degrees of Capricorn 2 weeks ago. And where was that cycle beginning for you when you're looking at it in relation to your own birth chart? Where is Capricorn located? So you would plot the moon in there at 12 degrees of Capricorn, and 2 weeks later, naturally it gets to its opposition, which is what we are about to step into. And that's the full moon in Capricorn, which is at 27 degrees. There are some interesting aspects to this full moon. And there are some interesting examples that I'd like to share from a collective, media sort of level in terms of what's happening. There are some, extremely big things going on. There have been for quite some time, but there are some really huge things going on at the moment. We need to also remember that the Venus star point in Capricorn, it's been activated for a little while, but its exactness was actually on the 8th of January. Of course, that cycle of Venus going retrograde, that is going into the underworld, being reborn as a morning star in Capricorn, beginning a new 8-year cycle, started that journey with a conjunction to Pluto, which takes place 3 times, and we've got one more joining of Venus and Pluto. So she's retrograde at the moment still. Mercury is retrograde relative to the day of this full moon. Uranus is stationing direct a day after the full moon. The full moon is tightly linked, of course, to Pluto. That is that it is conjunct the sun and it is opposite the moon. There is a trine from Neptune. There is an inconjunct from Mars. So there's quite a few aspects. Some of the things that I want to share today, as well as the current energies, are also some further thoughts in relation to thinking about Cancer Capricorn, that polarity. So perhaps where I'll start, I think I want us to think about Saturn as part of this picture, of course, because it is the ruler of where the sun is located. It is the ruler of this cycle in terms of where it began in Capricorn. And as I mentioned in a very recent video, Saturn is not as one-dimensional as we might think. It has so many different layers to it. And we can take the esoteric perspective, which I will, and also the traditional perspective as well. But let me start by sharing my screen, and what I might do is actually just start with some examples of what's going on at the moment relative to people's charts, famous people's charts, of course. So, okay, everyone is pretty aware of the tennis player Novak Djokovic, and that he is here in Australia preparing to play for the Australian tennis championships, Australian Open. And I know that the entire world has been very focused on this particular individual because of the issues that have been transpiring relative to trying to kick him out of this country. And there was a court proceeding that took place just a few days ago, and the judge ruled in Novak's favour and criticised the authorities quite significantly in terms of how they were treating Novak, because they had him in a detention center. Basically, since he landed in Australia, he was just thrown into a detention center, interrogated at the airport, then thrown into a detention center. He was there for a few days. There's been massive protests here in Melbourne, Serbian communities, and many other people who are supporters of Novak. So there's been a lot going on. You know, we've had protests for the protection of children relative to the jab that's just been approved for 5-year-olds. So there's a extreme and understandable uproar about that. We have protests and matters going on with our Indigenous peoples relative to the land and how the complications and issues that these Indigenous peoples have faced for many, many, many years, and just the political injustices that have occurred around those issues. So those protests are very active at the moment in the state of Canberra in Australia. So there's just so much going on. Going back to Novak's chart, there's just a couple of things that I'd like to highlight. And very simply put, he has his sun in Gemini, which most of you would, recognize. So there's the sun in Gemini. He has a Saturn-Uranus conjunction. There are a few other things, but I'll perhaps just unpack these two things before I move on to the next one. So I just wanted to say, with the sun in Gemini, one of the things that I've observed over a very long time, when you're talking about public profile people, and when there are events that are going on in the world that where people will take an opposing stance, it's always sun in Gemini shows up a lot, because the archetype of Gemini, being the twins, being a dual sign, brings up those matters of division, right? And so in Australia, Novak has divided the nation, as it were, relative to people who are for him and people who are against him. And there's a really clear line that you can see with that particular division. And so I just thought that was an interesting component to these energies from him, meaning his own sun sign. The other thing about Saturn-Uranus, it is a conjunction, and we often don't necessarily think about a conjunction from the point of view of it representing a polarized energy, because it is an energy that is in unison, as it were, relative to the position of two bodies being together side by side, which is called a conjunction. But this shows us very, very clearly, not only this example, but this is the example that I'm using today, at least. Conjunctions can also operate as oppositions. Now, I have said before in a previous video that the conjunction aspect contains all possibilities. When you think about an aspect, each aspect has very specific characteristics and descriptions to it, right? And the conjunction, which is the reason it has all possibilities, is because it contains the whole 360 degrees in it. So a Saturn-Uranus conjunction in the case of Novak, what's happening here is that he is the Uranus, and he is faced off by Saturn. In this case, Saturn being represented by the status quo, the consensus, the government, the authorities. And he does also have a Mercury Uranus opposition. If you do whole sign houses, Mars goes into his 7th house. So there's a lot of different energies that speak to the manifestations of his frequency and how it is met, perceived, experienced in this land at the moment. Relative to some of the things that are hitting off his chart at the moment, the Venus star point in Capricorn is conjunct his ascendant, but further in the first house. This is a rectified time, by the way. The recorded time, I think, is about 11:30. This is a rectified time that I have rectified. So the Capricorn Venus star point at the moment is in his first house. So boom, it's lighting him up. The first house is our self, isn't it? So the Venus Capricorn star is just, directly putting the spotlight on him, which is exactly what's going on. There are some other things with Venus star points, but I won't continue on that. And just one other final point on Novak's chart. Transiting Pluto at the moment, being at very late degrees of Capricorn, actually forms a trine to his sun. Okay, it's an out of sign trine, because Pluto is about It's a couple of degrees away from entering Aquarius, right? So when it enters Aquarius, technically, which is 2023, it'll be almost exactly trine his sun. But here's the thing with orbs, right? Now, orbs, is a very controversial issue depending on what perspective you take. I allow quite a large orb in my evaluations, and I have reasons for that through my observations, just seeing why and where and how things kick in when they do. So, Pluto is only about 3 degrees away from being exactly trine his sun. So Pluto is trine his sun. And before he had the court case and had the victory, I had a feeling that he would win that court case, which is exactly what happened. But there is another shadow that's lurking over him at the moment, and that is upon subsequent investigation and inquiries, due to his travel dates, they can, by the law, technically still revoke his visa. So that's where it sort of stands with him at the moment. And I just want to show you a couple of other charts which are also speaking to these matters. So Australia's national chart, okay, the sun is at 10 degrees of Capricorn, Saturn's at 7. So the current Venus star point is basically illuminating those energies. So there's Australia's chart being hit off by the Venus star point as well. Then we have this guy here, Alex Hawke, who is an Australian Minister of Immigration, and he holds the balance of power really at the moment to revoke his standing visa, to revoke Novak's standing visa status, and it's still being negotiated and considered as we speak. So at this point in time, we don't know whether Novak will be able to play or whether he will be sent out of the country based on what this guy says. And what I find really interesting about this guy is that the Capricorn Venus star point happens to be opposite his sun. So there's another guy who's having activations in his chart with the Venus star point. So the Venus star point is hitting off three charts that are crucial to the current situation relative to Novak, right? So I just wanted to show that because I thought this is a good way to demonstrate to you, to show you the power of the Venus star point. Okay, so let's now move on to the full moon chart. So here's the full moon chart. There is the full moon in Cancer. again, as I said at the very beginning, consider where this full moon started, which was at 12 degrees of Capricorn, right? And now it's reached its opposition point, so it's opposite the sun. So this, I mean, the full moons, as you know, we all are aware, most of us are aware, always illuminate, put the spotlight on things, for better or for worse. Whatever is going on, the spotlight just, you know, it's on it, it's all over it. On a personal level, and this applies to the collective to an extent as well, but on a personal level, the Capricorn new moon that began a couple of weeks ago is a very powerful new moon. It was the first new moon to the year. The Venus retrograde cycle is also in Capricorn, which is the Venus star point. Now we have the full moon in Cancer. There's been, you know, a strong sense of getting a clearer picture of our own reality. Saturn and Capricorn corresponds to the structure of our reality at a very basic level. So, you know, I mean, just very simply put, you know, a couple of weeks ago, new moon in Capricorn, an opportunity to reconstruct, as I think I used those words in the new moon video, to reconstruct our perspective of reality. I said much more, obviously, but go back to that video if you want to hear more about that. But 2 weeks later, with the full moon, again, with any planet or anything you are looking at in the chart, it is always important to look at things in their polarity, because there is always a polarity. You're never assessing one thing in isolation, or one singular thing, as it were. You may start by looking at a singular thing, such as the moon in Cancer, but then immediately you will draw in its polarity, which is Capricorn. So we've reached the full moon where there's this illumination feeling around the deeper soul, heart soul centered components to our life, really, to where we are at the moment. And the opposite point, the polarity point, being Capricorn, Saturn energy, is the reality that we perceive, right? So this energy is just bringing up these matters of where am I at internally, and therefore what is my perspective externally? Because the external perspective that you have is merely just mirroring your inner frame, your inner space, your inner center, your heart, your soul, and how you might be nurturing that, developing that. It is Cancer, so, you know, at that very simplistic level, basic level, it's quite a volatile energy, right? It is the moon, which corresponds to our emotional body, amongst many other things, the subconscious, the pre-ego stuff, the things that are very, very deeply ingrained within us. And so here it is in Cancer, which is its own sign, its home sign. And so traditionally that's considered to be a rulership position, but it is a very, very volatile energy. It's highly, highly sensitive. I would have to say that Cancer is a very sensitive sign, but also very reactive, right? It's reactive from that emotional level. When you think about an emotional reaction to a situation, it comes up spontaneously, right? You don't sit there and, unless you're acting or something of that nature, you generally will not sit there and premeditate on an emotion, on an emotional reaction. It just naturally, organically, for better or for worse, rises and is projected, right? So that's Cancer. So, full moon in Cancer, here is Uranus about to move direct the subsequent day. We have Pluto conjunct the Sun and opposite the Moon, and we have Neptune trine the Moon. So there's quite a few energies going on here. Mercury is also retrograde. I'll come back and talk about things like Mercury retrograde, Uranus direct, and so forth. But these energies are connected to this full moon. I see, given that Uranus has basically stopped, right, and it's ready to change direction, so that portal is open again. So the Uranus qualities, the Uranus significators, that whatever Uranus represents, which is essentially freedom, revolution, awakening, individuation, individuality, authenticity, breaking away from a consensus state. Well, all that is wrapped up into this full moon, right? So given the nature of everything that's going on, I it's obviously going to be a very reactive moon, right, on a collective level. But obviously, in terms of how we respond to this energy, that depends. That's a very unique situation for all of us, right? Just depends what's going on in our life. Where did this new moon begin? Where is the full moon in your chart, and so forth, right? But it is a very volatile, heightened moon. And look, the opposition to Pluto is a lot of different things, and really a lot of difficult things as well, because Pluto, it corresponds to death, to endings, right? Now, at a very personal level, this could be speaking to the lunar cycle as where it started for you, and reaching a point now 2 weeks later from when it started, to really coming to terms with perhaps some emotional conflict and situation that you've been challenged by or struggling with the last couple of weeks, and being able to see it more clearly. Full moon enables you to see, and being able now to purge it, right, to purify it, to transform it. I mean, there could be a number of different things going on for you and every single person on the earth, and there usually is, right? But there would be some particular matter that for most people would be identified from that external level relative to their life conditions and so forth. And this full moon will just really illuminate and trigger, activate, perhaps is a better word. Trigger can have a bit of a negative connotation. That just the entire emotional state of everything that's been building from just a couple of weeks ago. Of course, that has layer upon layer upon layer upon layer relative to everything else that's going on in your chart, but we are just talking about the full moon energy at the moment, right? Capricorn is a feminine sign. Cancer is also a feminine sign. So there's a really obvious vibration of the feminine speaking. That's not to undermine the masculine or to make, it's not about division. It's not about making this better, this not so good, etc., etc. We're just making a distinction between feminine and masculine. In this case, we have a full moon in Cancer, which is a feminine sign, in a feminine planet, the moon, opposite the sun in Capricorn, another feminine sign. So there's a very strong feminine archetypal signature emanating through the ether with these energies. And what does the feminine do? It does many things, but the primary thing it does is connect. It's the connector. So this energy is about connecting, and connecting to what? In Cancer, it takes us inside to the soul. And the opposite sign, Capricorn, which is ruled by Saturn, is the gatekeeper of the soul. So in esoteric astrology, Saturn is considered to be the gatekeeper. It's the lord of time, the lord of karma, the lord of this 3D earth reality, but it is the lord of being at the gate, right, of the world that we experience at the physical and the world just beyond that or past that. So it's very interesting when you think about that, because it tells us that apparent split or division is only an apparent experience from our physical point of view, but there, in truth, there is no split or division. The soul is housed in your physical body, right? So they're there together. They're not split at all. And that could be an analogy and a metaphor that we could use for Earth and anything that's outside of this earth plane, such as the transcendental, which is soul, right? So these energies really rise very strongly inside us during, a new moon in Capricorn, full moon in Cancer. It activates those thoughts, feelings, memories, experiences, and it really is an opportunity to allow us to become more aligned, right, with body, soul, as it were, reality, earth, heaven, whatever words you want to use. I point up there, not as if it is up there. That's just, it's just a habit. We all kind of tend to, not all, but most of us tend to, when we're talking about something that is not local, we tend to point out there, right, as if it is outside of ourselves. But in truth, in essence, it's not. It's all actually within. But when the left brain tries to understand that, it struggles, because it's trying to understand things from a linear perspective. And when you're talking about soul, you're talking about soul time and infinity and transcendence. So it's a very different ball game. Esoterically, as I said, Saturn is the gatekeeper, right? Saturn connects to, in esoteric astrology, it connects to ray number 3, and that's the ray of active intelligence. And that might sound a bit weird, but that's the ray that it connects to. And here's just a comment from Alan Oken's work. Saturn works primarily on the mental plane as it serves to structure thought forms into cohesive patterns for the externalization of willpower. Thus, it is the embodiment of the third ray of active intelligence. Saturn is also the vehicle for the dweller on the threshold and stands for the Lord of Karma, a barrier to greater conscious expansion unless love, wisdom supersedes all other influences. So what that's basically saying is that, first of all, Saturn is a sacred planet, by the way. In esoteric astrology, Saturn is a sacred planet. There are non-sacred planets and there are sacred planets in the model or wisdom teachings of esoteric astrology. It says there that it's the vehicle, Saturn is the vehicle for the dweller on the threshold. So that threshold is that point where I talked about a moment ago, Saturn being the gatekeeper of what we would define as two different worlds, let's say, which is really just a state of consciousness, right? And so it's further suggesting that in order for this consciousness, which is what we are, to continue to evolve and expand, it's got to really be in total alignment with love wisdom, which is ray number 2, ruled by the sun, Jupiter. So, and esoteric astrology, it's the premise that the core essence of esoteric astrology is understanding the integration of soul personality, right? Personality being the body, as it were, right? The person. So, Saturn has these other dimensions to it. Here's some key words that correspond to ray number 3, which is Saturn ruled: truth-seeking, fertile conception, regenerative and transforming, penetrating insight, clear and comprehensive intellect, sincere in purpose, broad-mindedness, soul expression through abstract intelligence, thought power to mold matter, a continually generating spontaneity, one who understands a problem, interested and sensitive to things, reasoning for outer or exterior significance, clear seeing into the mysteries, self-confident without economy in all facets of life, selective, discriminating, not prone to worry, understanding the unison value of things, seeing and the understanding of significance of all things, and so on and so forth. There's quite a few. They're just some keywords whilst they correspond specifically to ray number 3 is ruled by Saturn, right? So given everything that's going on in the Saturn world, there is an undeniable destruction and reconstruction going on, which is Saturn Pluto. And here we're at the beginning of 2022, right? We've just stepped into this new year, as it were, although the new year doesn't begin till the 21st of March, as per 0 degrees Aries, the true astrological date of the new year. Nevertheless, relative to the man-made calendars, the new year has already begun. So we all go into the new year with some hopes, some plans, things we want to change, things we want to recreate, things we want to leave behind, and so forth. And in this extreme cataclysmic third dimension reality as it appears on the surface, there's so much uncertainty, right, on so many levels. And we've talked about this, for the last couple of years. Whilst there is a particular narrative that is in no uncertain terms unfolding extremely quickly, which is very threatening to our very survival, we have had to find what we're really made of deep inside ourselves and who we actually really are. That's what this has evoked in all souls. With this full moon and the new moon beginning in Capricorn, a couple of weeks ago, the emphasis of all of that is highly activated at the moment. And we have the Venus star point in Capricorn as well. The other thing is that when does that happen? Let me just, the subsequent day, right? So on the 19th of January, the nodes actually move into Taurus and Scorpio. So let me just show you what that looks like. So there they are there. So the nodes always move backwards in the zodiac in the same way that the Venus star point moves backwards in the zodiac as well. I want to come back and talk about the moon's nodes, of course, because this transition is an extremely significant transition. And of course, Venus rules the North Node. Okay, and so this shift is happening while Venus is activated as a morning star, beginning a new 8-year cycle. And the morning star, means many things, but it really connects to earthly matters, what we are doing, on the earth. You could think of a million things around that, but it has got to do with the warrior goddess attending to what needs to be attended to on the earth. And really, I mean, whilst that means so many different things, I see that as also being primarily about that heart, soul, personality, if you like, alignment. It's about getting things right wherever we are, whether we are in the soul world, in another dimension, in the 3D reality. We are always evolving, and we are always attempting to cultivate and integrate that soul alignment with the heart. In the 3D world, it's with the personality. In the soul world, it'll be different things, right? Venus, the Venus star point really lights up those matters in our heart, because Venus is the goddess of love, unconditional love. She's the cosmic heartbeat, that beats your own heart and beats the heart of the earth and the heart of every single soul on the planet. So we have huge things going on moving forward, and certainly with the full moon in Cancer, but the moon's nodes shifting into these signs, Taurus Scorpio polarity is indeed one of the very challenging polarities, actually. And I will go into that when I come back and do a different session just on the moon's nodes. But it is important to bring this into this lunation cycle, because whilst the full moon is a day before, well, we still have another 2 weeks of this lunation cycle after the full moon. So the transition of the nodes occurs during this particular lunation cycle, right? A lunation cycle is generally 1 month, 4 weeks, right? So this transition of these nodes is occurring in this particular lunation cycle. That's going to be important when we sort of project forward, if you like, right? Ruled by Venus as well, North Node, and South Node ruled by Mars, Pluto. And here we have Pluto conjunct the Sun opposite the Moon, largely speaking to the deepest looking into our deepest worries and fears around what's going on at the moment. And ultimately, understanding what's going on, not from what is said to you out there, but from what is being told to you from within. You know, it's it's a soul thing, you know, and this full moon in Cancer it's a soul thing. It's a soul energy. So yeah, we have strong opportunity um, to be really sort of disrupted by this energy as well. You know, Uranus about to turn direct. Full moon in Cancer, very volatile. And I guess, you know, whatever rises, whatever is activated, whatever is brought up inside you, I guess it's about, you know, giving it the, you know, the space to hold, to look, to work with, to understand what that is about for you, how that speaks to your own inner security and your external security, which is basically Cancer Capricorn, right? So I think I'll leave it there because I have to attend to some other matters, but I just wanted to give a not a super long session, but one that I feel holds value in the points that I've mentioned for us to consider. I think the inconjunct from Mars to the Moon, you know, is a tricky aspect as well. Mars corresponding to anger, violence, willpower, determination, courage, strength, power. Now, obviously, you know, that's going to have its expression on the collective field, and it will have its personal expression felt from within ourselves, right? But that Mars, you know, is likely to be a blind spot, an irritation of some kind, but also again an opportunity to work on what is your blind spot here in a particular situation that's going on at the moment, relative to your own sense of heart, security, soul, inner standing, connecting to your own inner wisdom. You know, what's happening there with that, right? That's what I would say to that. Okie dokie. I'm going to head off now, and it's really, really hot here today. I've got a possum that's really hot. He's in a bucket on my balcony. I've given him some fruit today. I even gave him a bowl of water. I've got my Queen Coco. She's really hot. Everyone's feeling really hot today. I know that's pretty meaningless and doesn't really mean much, but I just felt like sharing it. Finally, I just want to give a shout out to a lovely soul by the name of Lynn, who lives in the USA, Alabama. She's a very, very, very generous soul who's been very supportive. And I just want to give a shout out to you. I hope you are listening to this. Shout out to DJ Nocturna as well, who's another dear friend of mine and a very generous soul as well. So leave your comments and questions below, and you know, email me if you are interested in having some kind of reading. There are many different types of readings you can have. And also, by the way, there's some things coming up with the Venus Star Point, which will be connected to a group of people, actually a group of practitioners, and that is all connected to Ariel Gutman, and that's something that is just being given birth to and developing. So I'll keep you all posted on that. Okay, much love, and hope you are all well. and I will see you all very, very soon. Bye for now.